Welcome to Real Pieces with Annette Insdorf. I am so gratified to be interviewing three artists who created one of the best films of 2020. Congratulations to director Kevin Macdonald and the two actors Tahar Rahim and Jodie Foster. Both are nominated for Golden Globes for The Mauritanian, a film with real grit as well as nuance. It tells the true story of Prisoner 760, a Mauritanian Muslim detained and imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay in 2002. He was held without charges by the US government for about 14 years in the wake of 9/11. Kevin Macdonald is the award winning director of fiction features, including The Last King of Scotland and State of Play, as well as documentaries, such as One Day in September, which won the Oscar for 1999, Touching the Void, and Life in a Day. I'm going to start with Kevin. The origin of this film. At what point did you get involved? What was it about the Mauritanian that made you feel it had to be a movie?
Well, it's about 3 years ago, I guess, maybe even a little bit more. The Mohamedou had just been released from Guantanamo about less than a year before, and I was sent a copy of his book, Guantánamo Diary, by the Benedict Cumberbatch's company. Benedict, who's also in the film, he had done a little bit of work doing some readings from it when the book was published to raise awareness for Amnesty International, and he had become fascinated by the story. I was sent it, I read it, I thought, what an amazing testimony written from inside. It's the only book written inside Guantanamo. It was smuggled out as letters, which is what you see depicted in the film. I thought it was fascinating, but I thought, I don't see how you make a movie out of this. And then they said, speak to Mohamedou, the real Mohamedou. And he was really the key to it, because he's not at all what you expect. You would imagine somebody embittered, angry, resentful, anti-American. But instead, what you get is an incredibly sensitive, intelligent man with the widest frame of reference. I mean, he's read Goethe in the original. You're probably the only other person in this Zoom call who has, Annette. And he's incredibly warm and funny and can talk with great perspective on his story. And I thought, this is a character to make a film about. And this is a way in to telling, a story which maybe people think they know about Guantanamo, but there haven't really been any movies about Guantanamo from the perspective of a prisoner, an unjustly imprisoned prisoner. And so that's what I set off to do. I immediately got in touch with Tahar, sent him the script when we had one. And we had worked together before in a very different movie 10 years before. And he read it and said yes on the spot. And then we waited 2 years to get the money to make the movie, of course.
Of course. And by the way, I saw that movie, The Eagle.
Yes.
I saw it recently because in preparation for this interview, I barely recognized Tahar Rahim with this kind of blue mud paint, bald except for a strange mohawk.
Well, I have to tell you that that movie at that time, I saw Tahar in his brilliant film A Prophet, which I'm sure you know. I thought he was so fantastic, and I was making this Roman movie with Channing Tatum in the lead, and I thought I must get Tahar. He's so wonderful. And there was a part, he didn't speak English. You see, he spoke about the same as my French, which is not yours and Jodie's. So there was this role which was a Gaelic prince who speaks ancient Scottish Gaelic, and Tahar learned all the lines phonetically, learned to speak Gaelic, and came to Scotland and spent a very wet month with me.
Very cool.
Very wet month.
Yeah, great memories. We had a joke. People would call me Avatahar because of the blue.
Well, it's a curious and interesting film, but I much prefer The Mauritanian. Now, as you say, this is a very personal memoir by Mohamedou Ould Slahi. The adaptation, I noticed, is by three writers, M.B. Traven and Rory Haynes and Sohrab Noshirvani. Were there many drafts? I mean, when you have three screenwriters and a director who I know is very involved in the creation of everything, how many drafts before we got to the final film?
Oh, many, many. There were only really sort of two writers. There was the first writer, and then the pair of writers who worked together, who came on later on in the process, and who helped with the clarity of the piece. I think the thing that had been so challenging at this is how do you make a movie where you have three different perspectives, three different time zones, and also where you're trying to be fair and balanced and tell a story at the same time that is somewhat compelling for a mainstream audience. Because I didn't want to make a movie which was only going to be preaching to the converted. It was only going to be for people who already know about Guantanamo and feel they've made their mind up about it. I wanted to make a movie that would reach a wide audience while not selling short the material. So it was that balance, trying to tell us a story that worked on a kind of entertainment level, if I can even use that word in this context, but I wanted it to be entertaining, but also be truthful to the complexity of this situation, and most of all, truthful to Mohamedou's character, his extraordinary, unique character.
I confess that one of the reasons I'm asking about the screenplay is because both Sohrab and Rory are alumni of Columbia University's MFA film program where I teach. And Sohrab was born in Iran, Rory in the UK, and I know that their original TV series Informer was broadcast on Amazon and BBC. It received a BAFTA nomination for Best Drama Series. Columbia is very proud of these two guys.
Well, they did a great job. So I met them through the BBC, who are one of the financiers on this project, and it's been so impressed by what they did on The Informer. And they obviously, to have a Muslim writer as well was very useful. Somebody who could really give us an authentic picture of Islam. And so, yes, they came on, and the script before that was very good, but it was messy and kind of ill-structured and trying to grapple with all of these many different strands. And they came in with some much needed sort of tough love, shears. And also they were very, when Jodie came involved, she and I talked about the character, and they were very responsive and did a couple of drafts back and forth from Jodie's point of view. And most of Jodie's notes were, give me less dialogue and make me meaner. That was that about right?
That's about it.
That's about it.
And actually, I'm going to turn to Jodie. I mean, your character in The Mauritanian, I know I'm not the first to say this, but it does carry a resonance of Silence of the Lambs when you're walking into a prisoner's cell. But you just said, make me meaner, Kevin. Your Nancy is so much more steely than the vulnerable Clarice, let's say. And I don't recall you ever playing a real life character before. Is there a greater sense of responsibility when you're playing someone who really exists?
Yeah, it's only the second real life character I ever played. The other one had already been dead for a couple hundred years, so I could, a little bit more license I could take. There is responsibility, I think, because, you want to get it right. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing. And in this case, I think I'm always struggling with that. That's one of the reasons why I've never played real characters. I struggle with that because I do like to change things. To me, the text is the most important thing, and I feel like we're all here to serve that. And the good news is that Nancy was okay with giving me the license to, make her a little bit meaner, so that I could create a longer arc for her where she changed over time. But there's still a lot of Nancy in there. She's a bunch of contradictions. She's got the red lipstick and the red nail polish, and she likes to drive race cars and listen to country western music, which doesn't seem to fit at all with this very steely, sober, methodical legal lawyer that she is.
I'm fascinated that she's now the lead counsel for Chelsea Manning on appeal. But what fascinated me about your incarnation, besides the acting, your incarnation of people is always remarkable. It was that dark red lipstick and nails.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my mother always used to tell me after I was about 20 that I couldn't go outside of the house without lipstick, even to take out garbage. So I did some research and I actually found an interview with Nancy Hollander. And I love what she said here. My parting words are the words from my mother, which are always be feminine. My mother was exquisitely feminine. She didn't put out the garbage without her makeup on. The day she died, she insisted on having rouge put on, but she was very powerful, unquote.
Yeah, I mean, see, if I had seen the script, I would never have made that choice. And there's something kind of wonderful about her, and I think it also speaks a little bit to her her self-protectiveness. I think, you know, the fact that she has defended so many guilty people over the course of these years, that her mission has always been to uphold the rule of law and the Constitution, believing that everybody needs a defense. But that's meant that, you know, she's had a lot of disappointment, and she's had to create this veneer. So in some ways, the lipstick and all of that sort of worked for that.
Absolutely. And the white hair, very white.
Yes, yes, she does have that white hair, which I know that Kevin wasn't necessarily so keen on. He was like, nobody knows what she looks like. Why does she have to have that hair? He was not wrong, but there's something, I don't know, there's something about that transformation, I think, that makes her, it makes her character so specific.
I agree. And now I'm going to go to Tahar, because I'd love to know more about your preparation. I gather you had to learn Arabic plus the Mauritanian accent. I mean, what were for you the most important parts of the preparation?
The most important part was, I guess the moments I've spent with Mohamedou. Because, you know, when I picked the script, I said yes straight away. And I thank Kevin for this. I was really happy, and at the same time I was angry because it's a true story, and I felt sad. And there was something that I needed to understand is his philosophy, his ability to turn anger into forgiveness. I was like, if it was me, I don't know if I'd be able to behave this way. So by spending time with him, I asked him a lot of questions, and I felt that it was not the right way to, you know, to create my Mohamedou in a way. I felt like I needed to just listen to him, talk to him about life, about many things, and observe him. So this was the most important thing, because when you get a script, I didn't want to talk to Mohamedou before I was really connected to what was written on script, because it's not a fiction, but it's a movie. So you need to adapt some stuff. And from then on, I wanted to go to Mohamedou. So yeah, this was the most important and the most useful thing I did to be able to create my character.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge, on a, shall we say, more mundane or banal level, you must have lost a lot of weight. I mean, were you confined to a very strict diet, and did you have to endure some kind of deprivation to help you experience Mohamedou's physical limitations?
Absolutely. You know, I lost, a big amount of kilos in a short time, about 10 to 12 in 18 days. And I was in touch with a, how do we call that? A dietitian?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she, a nutritionist, thank you. And she, you know, she gave me some, what to eat, how to eat it. And it was like a little bit of vegetables, green, and a little bit of protein and all of it. And it was frustrating because I had some taste, you see, and I wanted to eat more. So I went hard on me, and I quit this. There was menus, and I just went on full protein, white eggs, and chicken breast, just a little. But there's something very interesting when you fast and you experience this drastic diet, is that emotionally you change. So your even your brain is turning differently, and that helped me a lot to be connected to my emotions and to to discover some emotional feels that I never expected, and that I didn't know it could be like that, because your emotions were popping up, and you, the worst thing you could do in this moment is to try to control them. And usually this is our job, to control emotion and play with them. And this time I was like, no, don't control them. Just let it go and surrender to it. And I'll try this again for other parts, I guess.
Well, when you talk about this aspect of control or letting go, that also obviously has to be choreographed with the director. So I'm going to push this now towards Kevin. And, I can understand that you cast Tahar on the basis of a prophet. And there, in such an amazing performance, the character was jailed, I think it was for 9 years or 6 years. Could you talk a little bit about how you worked, and this is also for Jodie, how you worked with both of these actors? Do you have a long rehearsal period, or do you prefer a kind of freshness on the set? And this whole question of how much control should the character be manifesting, especially for Mohamedou, was that worked out either in rehearsal or in the number of takes that were done?
Well, your first question about rehearsals, ideally, we would have had, I think we were going to have 3 or 4 days of rehearsal. We filmed this in South Africa for the most part, a little bit in Mauritania, and we shot a few weeks before Christmas, and Jodie was there. Then she went back to LA, and then Tahar was coming down after Christmas to do his part, all after Christmas. And Jodie got really sick, really, really sick, and couldn't come back. And we, being a low budget film, we had to carry on. You do. So poor Tahar had to do, without any real rehearsals, his last big speech of the film, the amazing, beautiful speech he gives in the court, which is almost word for word what Mohamedou actually said. He had to do that as his first day of acting, which is an absolutely awful thing to throw any actor into, having to do their last scene on the first day before they've explored the character. But when we saw him do that, the DP Alvin and I, we both looked at each other and were like, wow, where did that come from? That's, we knew we had the right actor, and he was going to give an amazing performance at that moment. So when Jodie got a little better, she came back, and we had, I think, an afternoon, maybe, was it an afternoon together where we read through the scenes, and we, made some adjustments to them. And I find, my experience is that, I like to have a loose feeling on the set so people can make things up, improvise, make mistakes, and not over rehearse beforehand. But I think rehearsal is really useful in terms of just getting those intellectual questions out of the way. Is this the right line? What does this mean here? Because otherwise, apart from anything else, you can spend hours on the set discussing these things and wasting precious time. So we had a chance to do that pretty much for the big scenes they have together. And then we went bang into it, and we did their scenes, the 4 big scenes they have together, pretty much day after day over 1 week, which was a very intense week when we're stuck in a tiny little cell. I'd wanted, everything in Guantánamo, it was important to Mohamedou that the physicality of the place, the space was absolutely right. Because he said, the American government has spent millions of dollars preventing people from knowing what it's really like in there. So you have to be accurate on that. And there are other things in the movie which are obviously dramatized, but the space, the place, what it feels like is really accurate. And we were so stuck in these tiny cells. So it'd be Jodie and Tahar and Shailene, and then, myself and however many crew members sort of hanging off the roof, trying to find a little space to be. And I think what was very interesting for me was watching Jodie and Tahar act together, because they have very different approaches, I think. Jodie's approach seems to me to be very prepared, and she seems to know, and maybe she'll tell me she's not, but she seems to be knowing what she wants to achieve on each line, and she's thought about it. And so when she comes, you feel like, the first couple of takes, you feel like, oh, great. She's got it. She knew exactly what she was going to do, and she's delivered it, ping. And Tahar, and particularly I think because of this performance, because it's such a complex character, and you're never quite sure what you make of him. So we were always sort of moving it around, moving the dial a bit, but he likes to play with it, and he doesn't know what he's going to do before. I would say, how are we going to play this? I don't know. I'll see when I get there. And he would try it one way, and I would sort of talk to him about it, and then he'd try it another way, and we'd talk about it a bit more, and find the scene, find the truth of that scene in the moment in a more improvisational way. So these two different approaches, I guess it's the sort of American approach, the Hollywood approach, and maybe the European improvisational. I don't know, that's probably a false geographic simplification, but very different approaches. But I think they're both rubbed off on each other. And I think by the time we get to the sort of explosive scene between them, where Jodie pretty much walks out. Oh, there goes my phone. Sorry, I'm going to get rid of that. When Jodie walks out on Tahar's character, I think at that time they sort of each one had sort of cross-fertilized in performance style the other, and I think that's for me the performance-wise the highlight. This particular scene, which we call the I'm like a statue scene.
Why didn't you tell us?
For nothing. Like fantasy. None of that happened.
You signed them.
They made me.
They made you as in they coerced you?
What do you think?
I don't know. You tell me. Did they coerce you? But you gotta tell me what happened, Mohamedou.
You asked me to set fire to this place, but I'm still sitting.
Well, then write it down. All right, that's what the pages are for. Write it down. You need to tell me the truth. You need to tell me what happened to you. I can't defend you. Do you understand that?
I don't need to tell you nothing. Whatever I say, it doesn't matter. This fucking island, I die here. Outside my family, my brother, their lives go on. Teri's life goes on. But me here, I'm like a statue. Now you will leave too, and your life will go on.
What the hell do you know about my life? This is it. This is my life. I spend my time in places like this, helping people like you. That's what I do. I don't question my commitment to your case.
The case. The case. The case. You're not committed to me. A person! No. You think I'm guilty? Say it. I mean, you believe I did all these things, so why the fuck are you here?
May I suggest that the distinction between these two formidable actors may be less geographical than the fact that Jodie is a director. She's not just a brilliant actress. She has directed some pretty damn good movies. And I think that, and Jodie, you'll tell me if this is on target, that even when you are merely, quote, performing in a film and not directing, you approach the script and your characterization with something of the director in treating the material?
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think that was true when I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old too. Yeah, I don't know that I would have become an actor if I hadn't just been thrown into it. I don't really have the personality for that. And I really admire actors. I'm always like, it's amazing what they do. How do they do that? Like, I have no idea how actors do what they do. And for me, it really is a balance between intentionality, choreography, decision-making, intellectual process, preparation, research, and then somebody says action. And then you dance, and there's an execution part to that. But you're always balancing those two things. If you are only one and not the other, you know, if you're all intellectual, then your performance can be, you know, obviously all the things we know, right? Overly prepared and authentic. And if all of you're doing is flailing your arms uncontrollably with tons of emotion without an idea about where it lands, then it, you know, doesn't have any intentionality. So you're always balancing those two things. And people are at different places on the spectrum. I've worked with lots of different actors. We all work differently. And it's sort of like a sacred place where you look at each other and you sort of you know, you have a secret handshake, a secret wink. You know, each know that you're going to do things differently, but that you will respect the other person and hold the space for them in order for them to have the best performance that they can give.
And Tahar, I happen to have seen quite a few of the films and even television that you've made. I loved The Eddie, where you play that vibrant Farid, the busboy who's also a trumpet player. I saw Mary Magdalene, where you're Judas. And in Farhadi's The Past, in 2013, your character Samir, and my favorite, besides The Mauritanian, the superb film that no one, I think, has seen in the United States called Free Men from 2012.
Oh.
Wow, it's set in World War II. You play Younes, an Algerian black marketeer, coerced by collaborationist French police into spying, especially on a mosque leader, because a clandestine operation is providing North African Jews with fake Muslim IDs. Now, this is the lead into my question. If you could compare working with Kevin to other filmmakers, because you've been doing a variety of things in different cultures and languages.
It's always hard to compare directors and the way they work. For instance, Jacques Audiard would be very energized and wanted to be surprised all the time. And Asghar Farhadi is the exact opposite way. He talks with you. Whatever you want to talk before the shooting, you can. We can change things. But from day one, I'm not going to change anything. And he was like telling me, I want you to say that line when you grab your glass of water, which can, I'm always afraid of directors who's very, precise and directed like this. But with him, I felt like I was free, maybe because we talked before for 3 weeks about what would happen. But with Kevin, it's very rare to me to have the opportunity to work twice with a director. It never happened to me, it's just you. And the whole process of, knowing a director, trust him, so to get to know more each other, which actor I am or not, it was already done. My trust in Kevin was, 100%, you see. So I knew that I would be, able to make mistakes and not be afraid to try things. And as Kevin, as you said, he did fictions and documentaries. And for an actor, when you work with a director that has the perfect way to know and catch what's an authentic feeling or emotion, you feel secure. Like even if I make a mistake, I know he's gonna come over and tell me we didn't reach the point and lead me there. And that's what happened with Kevin. And it's always better to work with a friend. And he cares for actors as well. And each time I would try, I'm always a bit uncomfortable. Sometimes I don't really want to say things to directors because, and he came to me and he said, don't be ashamed, always tell me what you think. The best idea always wins. So this is the best way to work and create. It was a teamwork, and I could really rely on Kevin. Each time I could call him if I had a question, and we've been talking for 2 years before shooting. So it's such a treat to have the opportunity to work this way with a director, and I had great partners as well. Yeah, it helps a lot when you work with someone like Jodie, even Shailene as well. Too bad I didn't have any scene with Benedict, but you said it perfectly before, right before Jodie. But when you can trust an actor and you feel respected in the way you want to work. That it's not a problem to think like, oh, if I don't talk more with my partner, maybe he will not like me, or it's gonna make the relationship complicated. All those things were out of my mind because she is who she is, and she relaxed me the first second we met. And it was a pleasure, a real pleasure.
And Kevin, would you agree that your formation as a documentary filmmaker prior to doing fiction and alongside it, you continue to do that in fact does affect how you work with actors and develop the film, that there's something about the emphasis on having a curious, observant gaze that doesn't necessarily fix or manipulate things, because documentary filmmakers can't really do that. Do you believe that that has affected your fiction filmmaking?
Yeah, deeply. I mean, I think as a fiction filmmaker, I probably suffer from a lack of imagination, because I'm always thinking about the facts first, and then I have to be pulled away from them, and I have to allow my imagination to sort of slowly catch up. I find that, you know, I love the process of collaboration that you have in fiction that you don't really have in documentary. Documentary, it's all kind of you and maybe an editor, but that's it, you know. And I think being freed from what's in my head at the beginning, you know, I have very set ideas about what I think I want, usually in this case, you know, based on what the real thing is. And as I said, I insisted on the sets all being exactly as they were, with no extra windows and this way. But actually, as we get closer to filming, and as I start to work with the actors and work with the cinematographer, I pull myself away from an interest in reality. And when we're actually shooting, I'm probably only interested in the, as Tahar said, the emotional reality of, you know, does that feel authentic? Does that performance feel authentic? But I think that if you come from a documentary background, you're always interested in spontaneity, the sense of spontaneity. That's at the heart of what makes a good documentary, things happening for real in front of a camera. So I'm always looking for those moments and enjoying those moments where something accidental happens, where something that can appear to be a mistake actually, oh, that gives us something. I suppose I'm trying to create an atmosphere where those accidents happen more and more often.
Actually, for Jodie as well, you know, you've worked with a remarkable range of international directors, but I'm aware that at least 3 of them also were directing documentaries. Some still are, in addition to fiction. Scorsese, Spike Lee, Jonathan Demme. No, I'm aware that he's gone, but have you felt that sometimes there was a difference in the direction that you get from a filmmaker who's also simultaneously doing nonfiction?
Well, I know you and I both agree that the director is everything. And that's how I was raised. You know, that's what I love about making films, is that it's a directorial vision and we're there to serve that vision. You know, you pick your directors. So hopefully you pick the correct one that is trying to say the same thing, that, you know, you're on the same path, but you really are there to serve them and to serve the story, not just the story they tell, but how they tell it, and the ambiance and the tone of what it takes to get there. So, you know, some directors like nobody to say anything on the set and for it to be deathly quiet and there to be absolutely not a pin will drop. Some like a lot of collaboration. Some like it to feel completely impromptu and improvised. And you spend those first weeks maybe of rehearsal trying to figure the director out. You know, how does he? This is his party, and how does he want? You know, does he want a band? Does he want me to talk to him? Does he not want to? And that process, I find that I love that process, and I love feeling like I'm there on the team helping him get there, because ultimately all those decisions are up to him or her, and they're all different. So in Kevin's case, the documentary spirit it's a part of his psychology. He is genuinely interested in everyone's point of view. He is genuinely curious about the point of view of the elevator man and of the guy who brought the car up. And he wants to honor the complexity of each one of those characters. And for me, I think that's very important in the Mauritanian, that, you know, there is no bad guy. I think we understand why Benedict Cumberbatch's character really came there in some ways with an axe to grind, wanting the death penalty and hoping to, you know, put this guy away, and then finding and understanding his humanity through that process. Kevin is genuinely interested in everyone's point of view, so that you have a film where each character has complexity. That being said, he's also, he loves cinema. And sometimes documentarians don't, you know, sometimes they're like, no, it has to be just, you know, we have to just put the camera there and just see what happens. But I think Kevin really does love the cinema. And I don't think that you could really make a successful movie of Mohamedou's life without taking his point of view and skewing it and having the camera represent Mohamedou, and to really get the feeling of what that experience is. And that's, you know, that's a cinema experience.
Beautifully put. And Kevin, in your research, did you use a documentary, for example, like Alex Gibney's Taxi to the Dark Side from 2009? Did you watch that? Because I was struck in that film how local people are paid to turn over so-called terrorists, which leads to innocent people getting tossed in too. So was that any point of reference?
No, not. I admire that film a great deal, but no, that felt slightly like a slightly different trajectory in that Mohamedou's story is simultaneously very complex. It takes, we've simplified his backstory an awful lot, but it's also very, very simple. He was a suspect because of associations he had had and a phone call that he had received from Osama bin Laden's sat phone, which was from his cousin, and his cousin, or his second cousin, was a kind of personal poet to Osama bin Laden. If you can imagine there's such a thing, that there's a personal poet to Osama bin Laden. And so this phone call, according to Mohamedou, and I absolutely believe him, was a phone call asking for a favor. Will you pay the bill at the hospital where my father is at the moment, and I'll send you the money. Now, when that was seen by the US authorities, it was first of all picked up by the BND, the German secret police, passed on to the American authorities. They see, oh, money transfer from bin Laden's camp on his phone. This guy's the middleman. He's obviously, you know, a recruiter is what they thought, or, you know, he's financing terror in some way. So Mohamedou is kidnapped. And that's the very simple, that's where it's different than the Alex Gibney thing. It's his country agrees for America to kidnap him. Mauritania is you know, very much in the pocket of the United States. It's a huge base for listening for all over Africa. They have a massive embassy with 700 people there. It's a desert country with hardly any inhabitants, but America has this huge listening presence there. So, and they give them a lot of money. And so when they say, will you hand over your citizen? They go, yeah, sure, have him. And so he's kidnapped. He's taken to Afghanistan briefly, he's taken to Jordan briefly, and he ends up in Guantánamo. And America will not believe that this guy is, no matter how many times he says, I'm innocent, they will not believe it. The more clever he is, because Mohamedou is an incredibly clever guy and probably quite cheeky to the interrogators, I imagine, knowing him, cracking jokes and that kind of thing. They think he's a mastermind. They don't think, oh, here's an innocent, clever guy. They think this guy's so clever that he knows how to pull the wool over our eyes. And they get more and more obsessed with trying to prove what they had, you know, the opinion that they'd already started with. And even to this day, they've released him, but they do not believe that, they will not accept that he's innocent, and they make his life misery. They won't let him travel. He's still stuck there in Mauritania. He has a child in Germany who they've, you know, got their BND, German Secret Service friends to harass. It's pretty unbelievable. So it's a very different and very specific story, Mohamedou's story.
And the end titles mention that he married Kitty, an American lawyer with whom he has a daughter, but they apparently can't live together yet. So he does not get to see her or their child.
They have, well, Kitty is a lawyer who went to see Mohamedou because I think she was writing a thesis on his case. And a relationship began. They saw each other back and forth. They married. You know, Mauritania is not a place that most people, particularly probably an American with certain expectations to a way of life, would probably, you know, enjoy living in. It's a very simple life. It's a beautiful place, but it's, you know, desert and the ocean, and no alcohol, no, you know, it's very strict religiously in some ways. And Mohamedou doesn't have a lot of money. So she was living in a very basic way. So she thought it's better to live in Germany. She can work in Germany, and then every now and again she can go and see him. But Mohamedou, who is trained as an electrical engineer, who is a highly educated, intelligent man, he wants to get out of Mauritania, but there's nothing for him. No option. He wants to go to Germany. He wants to go to Britain. He'd love to go to America. I mean, this is the amazing thing about him. He loves America in many ways. He respects America. and it's one of the weirder things about him is that he loves American music. He loves American movies. You see at the end of the movie, he's singing Bob Dylan song from his favorite movie, which is The Big Lebowski. You know, he knows every word of it by heart. So he's still suffering. His family are not able to be together. They could live in Mauritania, but it's not where he wants his son to be brought up. It's not where his wife wants to live. So we're hoping one of the impacts of this movie is that he will, some third country will give him refuge, and his wife, and allow him to, lecture on what he's experienced, allow him to write. He's written another couple of novels, and he's publishing one later this year, actually, find some peace with his family.
Well, that's, for me, an important question about what do you want audiences to take away from this film? I mean, obviously, now you've voiced one possibility that something can be done for Mohamedou. I mean, this is a movie that, in my experience, it elicited outrage at the conspirators in U.S. military culture. And yet there's something else going on, because Mohamedou, as you portray him, especially the way Tahar plays him, it seems like forgiveness is the most important thing, that's the key to freedom as opposed to external things. So I'm curious, maybe first for Tahar and then Jodie, what each of you would hope that an audience takes from this movie.
As you just said, there's a beautiful message of forgiveness and peace in the movie. And if people can understand that this philosophy is a good way to lead a life, would be great. But I think that if the movie can, help people with preconceived idea to start to question themselves and eventually maybe change their minds, it would be great. That would be a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, as Tahar said, Mohamedou has a lot to teach us about, they tried to break him of his humanity, and instead he became even more of a deep human being than he was when he went in. He's somebody who's, full of joy and love and forgiveness, and he's funny, and they couldn't break it from him. And I think that's an amazing lesson for us, because what do you do with fear and terror? And in his case, he chose to be a better human being.
And I'm guessing that one corollary might be to make us rethink the existence of Guantanamo Bay. I saw a PBS news broadcast that mentioned how it's costing, the cost of keeping one detainee in Gitmo is $13 million per year. And currently there seem to be 40 men that are still left there from an original almost 1,800, of whom 6 were cleared for release a few years ago. But because the Trump administration closed the office that arranged for releases, they are still there apparently. So for Kevin or either of the actors, is that also something that you are consciously hoping might change?
Absolutely. And Nancy Hollander, the real Nancy Hollander, is representing one of the inmates who's still there. And I think her great hope is that that the Biden administration are going to manage to do what Obama didn't manage to do. And for many complicated reasons, it's not a simple thing, but going to manage to actually close it. And I think she feels there are ways to achieve that. And I think what I hope of our movie is that by deeply humanizing somebody who was a prisoner there, the audience will feel moved by his plight. They will empathize with him. And you got to remember, this is a rare thing in American cinema, a sympathetic Muslim character. I don't know of really any other mainstream movies which have that character. Your knowledge of American cinema is deeper than mine, but I think it's a pretty rare thing. But I hope that this makes audience think of the other and see the other as a human being. And that in itself, that this is what cinema is so good at, isn't it? It's putting us in the shoes of others, and that people will think, this on a human level is a terrible thing, and we should close that prison as a signal to the world to say, America's moral authority is back.
Yeah. And by the way, I think you're quite right. I'm having trouble. I can think of independent American films that have sympathetic Muslim protagonists, but not any Hollywood larger budgeted films. Tahar, I was very pleased to learn that you're married to Leila Behti. I appreciate her so much. First of all, in The Eddy as Amira, and I had seen her in Radu Mihailniu's The Source back in 2011. Oh, she was so good. Are you both? Are you both increasingly balancing making films in French with English language international productions, or has Hollywood offered you sort of mainly roles as a terrorist?
Oh, that's what happened to me. But not just Hollywood, also Europe. And I never wanted to be part of those movies. And anyway, they found their actors, so they made it. I didn't want to help, something that I don't agree with. Anyway, more like a man and also as an actor. My wife, she's not really interested in working abroad. She likes France. She's doing her thing over there, but I like it. And as Kevin said it, I was surprised in a good way to see that there's a sympathetic Muslim character at the center of an American movie like this. It's great because finally we need to show those faces differently, because this is not what I see in the streets. This is not what I see when I travel. I mean, the way they depict these people usually on films. And it's very important that this happens nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. And, as a PS, I would add that not that many American films, big of the nature that this film is, because this is a large film, even if it was a small budget, not that many of them have a female character who is not defined by romance or by some kind of plot that emphasizes victimhood or horror. I really found Nancy Hollander to be a fascinating, self-contained almost character. And I don't know, Jodie, when you first were approached about this, did you find Nancy as a character to play a refreshing departure from what you've been offered?
I don't work a lot, so and that's, I know that I'm at a moment where that's a great privilege to be able to say I've worked for 55 years and now I really just want to make movies that feel really meaningful for me. And who knows what those will be? Sometimes it's a small comedy, sometimes it's a genre movie, but I have to feel that it's worthwhile and that bringing the character to life is worthwhile and somehow makes me a better person instead of a worse person, and by extension, the audience, the way that they receive her. I think I've made a lot of movies where the characters were not defined by their romantic involvements. And I'm not sure I did that on purpose, but I think that as a young person, I was like, I want to play somebody interesting. So there you have it. I am one of those people who would rather not work than to do a film that I don't respect, So I got very lucky with Nancy. She is an incredibly formidable person. And there was a moment where there was a lot of discussion about, should we flesh out Nancy more? Should we know more about her? Should we know about her marriage? Should we know about her children? And I think that we, little by little, really came to an understanding that the most important thing was to serve Mohamedou's story. And that if what we found out about Nancy didn't serve and wasn't part of the tapestry of Mohamedou's story, it should be taken out.
And also, she strikes me, the way you play her and from the interviews I've read, as not the kind of person who wants to indulge in telling you much about her private life. She has a role to play in the public arena, and that's where her focus seems to go. Yeah. But I'm going to add just one detail, because Jodie, you don't have to work that much as an actor, but you're working a fair amount as a director. I have really appreciated your films as, behind the camera as opposed to necessarily in front. Listen, I even saw and appreciated The Beaver back in 2011. I know that it got sort of mixed reviews, but I found it, I wrote down in my notes, it's such an affecting drama with darkly comic moments, anchored in a fiercely believable performance by Mel Gibson as a suicidal self-loather who finds salvation in the unlikely form of a hand puppet. And then I really liked Money Monster in 2016, a very entertaining drama about a TV finance show host taken hostage by a desperate working guy who lost all his money because of his TV tips, with George Clooney. So what I'm really wanting to know from this is, besides the directing that you are doing for cable series, Orange is the New Black, do you have any plans or intention to direct more feature films?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, because that does mean a lot coming from you. You know, people don't know, but you were my professor, so I've always looked up to you. And it means a lot to me that you actually follow my movies as a director. Yeah, I always wanted to direct as a kid, and I thought, you know, I always hoped that that was something that I could do, although I didn't know a lot of women directors, so I didn't know that that was possible. Thank God for Lena Wertmuller when I was young. But I really, I find that really completes me as a person. So I'm spending a little bit more time directing. Yeah, I'm working on stuff. I'm working on something incredibly ambitious right now, so who knows when that will come to the screen. And, you know, as you know, we develop a lot of things that somehow just don't always make their way. So a lot of work goes into things before anybody actually starts rolling one foot of film. I have a weird career as a director. My voice as a director is very different than what I choose as an actor. And I really like ensemble movies. I really like telling these, in some ways, very tiny movies that have somewhat of an absurdist comic side to them. So yeah, I make very different films than I would as an actor, and sometimes they're harder to get off the ground.
Yeah. And I didn't mention your first few movies, which had a fair amount of acclaim, Little Man Tate and Nell and Home for the Holidays. I was focusing a little more on the recent ones. Okay, we're almost at the end of time, but I did want to raise a question that goes back to Kevin's film Life in a Day from 2011. That was such a stirring international documentary, compressing into 92 minutes the 4,500 hours of footage sent in from 192 countries. They were all shot on a single day, July 24th, 2010. And those sent to YouTube, these moments of disparate lives were edited into a whole that's far greater than the sum of its parts. During a Q&A afterwards, I remember you said that you feel like the curator of these contributions, and I'm quoting you, "Chance often gives you something better than your plans," unquote. Was that true in the shooting or making of the Mauritanian at any point, that chance gave you something more?
Yes, every day. And those chances can be, I remember in Jodie's performance in the scene where she first meets Benedict Cumberbatch's character in a bar, a gift shop at Guantánamo Airport, which is something that actually exists. And it was very early in the morning because the DP had said we have to be here at 5 in the morning because the sun's coming up, and so we all traipsed there at 2:30 in the morning, something. And I remember that they're just going through the rushes of that the next day and looking at what we had done. And there was one take where Jodie did something so extraordinary with her face, and I don't know whether it's planned or whether it's as she was saying, a momentary piece of inspiration in the moment, that she does this look that says so much of horror at the realization of maybe this man I'm representing is guilty, but at the same time I don't really care about that, and I'm a bit shocked. And it's one of those looks where it says more than a page of dialogue would, a page of her with her ex-husband or with her child or any of those things about who this woman is, but you can't put it into words. And so those sorts of things that's what I love about filmmaking, the things that is like, I'm not sure exactly even what that means, that look, but it has so much depth and humanity to it. With Tahar, there was an amazing moment in that first day of filming that I mentioned, where he had to do his end speech on the first day, where he turned after one take to the guard who's next to him after he has delivered this beautiful speech to the courtroom, And on just one take, he turned to the guard and he said, "Did they hear me?" In this way that was like this heartbreaking and vulnerable thing, not scripted, but just one take, one that felt like the right thing in the moment. And I'm like, that's something that says so much about this character in this moment. You couldn't have written it. So yeah, I love that. I love the fact that these things just pop up. It's a gift, and that's what brings things alive.
I'll say. Well, I know we're at the end of our time. After STX Entertainment's theatrical release of February 12th, The Mauritanian will be on demand in early March. And I just want to thank the three of you for sharing your observations and recollections and aspirations with me and the 92Y audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette.
Thank you, Annette.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.